for the 2022 evaluation. So we did do a complete review and analysis of all the properties we performed. So this includes new construction, land values, building values, income and expense cap rates for the commercial properties. So once all the sales were qualified, the first step for us was to determine adjustments to the land. So through our analysis of the sales, we've increased the base land curve price that we work off of for adjustments 50%. The original price was about $105,900 per acre. Now we're at $158,900. So I just want to note that during the analysis, and I'm going to go over this further in the next paragraph, but we looked at the neighborhoods and they had modifiers. We determined that we adjusted these modifiers and took them off. So what happened was the effect of the average land value was brought to be about actually a 40% change after we changed the methodology of doing the analysis. We had determined excess land at $20,000 and is adjusted per neighborhood factor, depending on what that is for each neighborhood. So to talk about that a little bit more, so the step was to review, once we get the curve set, was to review the land neighborhood tables and the modifiers that existed. The idea is to make adjustments to further lower the coefficient of dispersion, which is the variances from neighborhood to neighborhood, so that things were equitable. A lower coefficient of dispersion indicates more equity among the properties. So what we found was that we made a certain amount of adjustments throughout the town of neighborhoods, adjusting codes and so forth, feeling that certain neighborhoods needed to be changed to a different type of neighborhood with a different adjustment factor. But most of the factors themselves, except for neighborhood E, G, and NS, remain the same. The modifiers, which were big increases or some decreases, range from 25% factor to 1.4. We looked at those, and during the review process, we identified the modifiers that were in each neighborhood. We looked at this and we felt that the best method to do, because they were somewhat scattered around and so forth, was to delete them and take them out of the methodology. Because we went around and readjusted neighborhoods based on the sales, and we're using just the neighborhood factors along with the curve to get land values for each area. So once we did that, we made the appropriate adjustments and we created the equitable values within each delineated neighborhood. So now it's a little bit more consistent and it's a little bit more simplified in the sense that we have the base land curve and then locational adjustments throughout the city depending on location, geographical area, housing stock, and so forth. So once that was completed, the next step was to determine what we do, we have a base land curve, we have a base construction cost, which is basically the cost of an average house without added elements of positive or negative. So we looked at construction manual costs, local costs, and analyzed the sales. And what we determined that, in general, these rates needed to go up around 50 to 55%. So the 2018 rates were around $95 to $100. Now they're more in the range of 150 to 155. So the next step was to review other characteristics as we did the peer review: building size, materials, age, quality of construction, and all the other variables that affect the construction cost of a building. So once the construction cost was developed, we needed to adjust for depreciation for some of the older properties and so forth throughout the community. So the previous values were based on an effective age method with a physical observation of the property. We set up and discontinued that. We created a depreciation table based on market data. This kind of creates an equitable determination of depreciation consistently from new homes to older homes. So we made an average depreciation table was developed through the sales by age, actual age, and then the condition of the property. Then adjustments for like inferior conditions or superior conditions at different levels, like poor, fair, good, very good, were set up so that we could adjust the property from the base, like the land curve, the base for, and just like the construction, a base average depreciation. And then let's say there was additional renovations and it was in good condition, we put it at good and it gives you less depreciation. If it needs work and fair, then it would be more depreciation. And this was levelly adjusted across by age and then the type of condition that it had. So this has been implemented now. We use this in all the other communities. And it's good because it's equitable in the sense that they're all treated the same in the process. Now, what we did to make sure that they were set up properly was we looked through each of the communities, through the community when we did the field review and identified from the inspections our opinion of what was average, what was good for each property. And then that was put on the property record cards so that it could be calculated through the table process. Now, we started the table at about 50 years old and below. So the average depreciation is about 35% for those properties. And then as it tiers, if it's inferior to it, it would have a higher depreciation. If it's superior, it would have a lower depreciation. So this is the table. The table continues to new buildings or it's a 0-year-old. So for example, if it's 1980, the depreciation is 29%, 1990, 22, 2015, 2010, 8, 2020, 1.5. So you can see that as it gets newer, there's less depreciation, obviously. So this is, I'll be showing a sales analysis table of all the different ages and how they're all now around at 100% of value that supports this methodology. Okay, so as I said, during that peer review, we determined the condition. It was completed based on the property inspection and the inspection guidelines that we set up at the beginning of the project, so that we were consistent on how we determined what something would be. Okay? So once this was all completed, the depreciation, we added the building value, depreciated building value with the land value, outbuilding values, and extra feature values to determine a final value. So these rates have been, and values conclusions were tested against the sales. For the residentials, we used 4/1/2021 to 3/31/2022 to ensure their market value. When we get to the commercials, because there weren't as many sales, we analyzed 2 years of sales, just so we have some reasonable sample. So below, I'm going to do 2 sections next. First is going to be the preliminary results based on the old values that were developed from 2018 to the new values now that are developed. So if you can see, I've done a breakdown by land class and by residential. I just want to state that the commercials, we're still slightly finalizing some of the specialty properties and the bigger ones. So this is tentative a little bit with the commercials because we're still finalizing. The rest of them, we've done the process. The only thing we have left to do once we're done here and we get approval from you to proceed is to do our quality control. Our old to news, work with the assessors, go through each neighborhood and do a final check to make sure that we're comfortable and that there's no errors or things that occurred, to seal the values to get them ready for the hearings. All right, so the conclusions were the single families for a 4-year period have gone up about 41%. Now to compare this to some of the communities we did last year, which had a 5-year cycle, you had a 4-year cycle, they had gone up about 50%. So that seems somewhat in line if you look at it per year.
Do you have a range? Do you provide a range also?
I can provide anything you want.
But what?
I don't have a range right here, like what was the lowest increase and what
Right.
was the highest?
Yes, exactly.
We can get that once you make a note. Sure.
Okay, I'd appreciate that, thank you.
Yep. Residential condos are up 48% on average. Two families 55, three 55, apartments 60, vacant land. And vacant land and also the land values itself for the improved were about 40%, as I had stated. And even though we raised the curve 50 by taking the modifiers off and adjusting some neighborhoods, it was creating a little different methodology, it came out to an increase of 40%. Commercial right now is at 5, but still needs to be finalized. Industrial's at 13, and that still just needs a look to be finalized. We're not including any utilities, that'll be done by another company. Mixed use was 42, and manufactured home or mobile homes had gone up quite a bit. So this is 81%. Now, we just finished doing Hudson next door, and they went up 80%. But you have to take it into consideration that, like the mobile homes are, last time was $60,000, $50,000. Now they're 90 or 100. Now the percentage is large, but it's based on a smaller dollar amount. And that's why that increase seems more severe than the others. But the dollar increase is not quite as severe in the sense of thinking of the market we're in now, an entry-level type, property like this. For someone to get in at 100 or 125,000 into the city is a low value point. All right. Now, I broke it out also by residential styles. So if the 41 is the standard, we can see the split levels with 38, colonials 38, raised ranch with 42, contemporaries 39, capes 42, ranch 43, conventionals 49, bungalows 50, gambrels 43, and Dutch colonials 45. You can see that in general, the bungalows are a little higher, but it's a very small group of properties, there's a few hundred of them. The ranges aren't too diverse or dispersed. So the low is at 38, and the high, excluding the bungalows, the conventionals is 49. Most of them hovering around 38 to 43%.
And are you finding homes that were assessed in 2018 for between $225,000 and $300,000 have gone up more dramatically than homes in higher categories?
Yeah, that tends to be what happens is the entry level. And I think what's happening too is that homes like the Capes and the ranches seem to be, as the baby boomers start to, want to kind of like go down from the larger properties, there's more of a demand for those, so those tend to be going up a little bit more, whereas the bigger colonials aren't quite. It's not a dramatic change here, but yeah, the lower end tends to go up a little bit more in the last few years than the higher end. Yeah, and that's the trend I saw in the other communities too. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just go through some of the stats so you can have an idea of some of the things that we looked at. We get more involved than just these, but I want to bring up the ones that were most relevant to, style, age, neighborhood, classes, and so forth. But we do look at price-related differential, meaning the high prices and the low. We look at time with the date. We look at building size. All those are reports we've done, and if you need anything further, we can get it for you. So if we look at the class for the single families, two families, and three families, you can see that in general we have them close to 100%. Three families, we didn't have much of a sample, but the singles were at 99 and the two families are at 100. Now the COD, or the coefficient of dispersion, is basically the bell curve that I talked about last time, where you have all the points near the median, and if the bell curve is high and close, it's a low COD. and that shows more equity. If we have a flatter bell curve and it's dispersed out with more points further away from the median, then we have what's not as equitable. So right now, it's desirable to have CODs for the single families below 10 and for the 2s and 3s below 12%. We're at 5.68, 7.5, and 4.45. So that shows a pretty strong level for the CODs of equity. Are you guys comfortable with that explanation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the single-family styles, ranches, split levels, colonials, capes, all those styles we talked about. We kind of go with the median for determination because it's a midpoint. It's not skewed left or right by higher or lower prices. You can see they're all within a few percentage points of the 100. Sometimes when you get smaller counts, they may be off a little bit more, but they're all within the accepted range. And the CODs are all well below 10. All right, so turning the page, we'll look at, the neighborhoods here are set up 2 identifiers. One are 2 letters, like E is early years, and then FH is a specific site, and then N is like a newer type of construction. And then there's like fair, average, good for the coding. So basically, these are all for single families. When we get to the next page, what they do is they add an M to the end of it, and it's for 2 and 3 families. However, the factors are the same. So if you have an EA and an EAM, the factor for the neighborhood is the same. It's just that we identify it out so we can see what the differences are for single families and 2s and 3s. But they're all in the same neighborhood with the same factor. They just put an M there so you can, if you want to see what the studies are for 2 and 3 compared to the 1, you can break it out and see it. You can also combine them. Is that clear? Okay. So as we go down, you can see that they're all pretty consistent. French Hill area, that is still a little high. So as I said, when we're done, we're going to do the quality control. I want to put it in there because that's where it is at this moment, but we'll be working on bringing that down. I just want to bring that to your attention. In general, as you can see, the rest of the neighborhoods are around the 100% range, and the CODs are low. So if we go to the next page, now we have the 2s and 3s, which have the same neighborhoods, but the M at the end for a multifamily. And we have those, and in general, those are all close to 100%. EFM only had 2 sales, but still relatively close, and the CODs are low. So the next thing was based on the depreciation. We want to show you, because we changed the depreciation, which was kind of a big issue here, and we made it tableized. And so what I did was, although we're starting from 1970 below, because at a certain point, the older homes, even if they're older, will only depreciate so much, because at that point, they're either torn down or they're renovated and brought up to average. So you'll see that even though we only use the table lower than 72, if you look at the less than 1900, 1900 to 1930, 31 to 50, 51 to 65, they're all right around 101, 100, 199 with good CODs. So that shows that our adjustments in the field and the setting up of the table was developed based on the sales. Then as we go down, you can see that it goes all the way up to the brand new, and everything is within a few percentage points to the 100. And the COD is pretty consistent and low for each section. Okay? All right. So, and then we're just gonna go on to some of the other categories, like the manufactured homes. So there were 57 sales over the year for those. We're in around 96%, and the median sale price is $125,000. So you can see that it's a low price. And if they were 70 or 80 before, they go up to 125, it's a high percentage, but it's based off of a low entry point. And I think that's one of the reasons why the low entry points you talked about increased more. Yep. Then there's the 20 or the double wide, and then some of the 20s are older. But again, they're close medians, and the COD is a little higher for these because of the variances, but acceptable at the level. Condominiums are broken out into condominiums that some of them that have land per deed, and some at the 1020 level, and the 1021 is a unit not including land value. So these prices were for the 102 at 581, kind of a condex, more set up like a house, but there's two of them. And then the rest are standard type of condos. And we'll break out the styles in a moment. That was at 300,000. Their medians are 98 and 100 with solid CODs. So these are the different variables of the styles, the 55Gs, garden style, 55T, townhouse. And Greg, can you identify the other three again, even though you told me it 5 minutes ago?
So 55 CW is Coburn Woods, 55 DN is detached no land, DW is detached with land, G is garden, T is townhouse.
Right. So these are the way that they're set up and designated throughout the community. So as you can see, the medians are very close to 100%, and the CODs are acceptable for the standards. So what's good with the process is, and then we further adjust them per complex, and we make sure, but there were 50 or 60 complexes, so we can get you the report, but I didn't really want to put it all on here. But we check every complex and make sure that they're also close to 100% and their COD is low. And we, through this, we'll put style codes of value on these for, based on construction, then we'll further adjust the complexes based on the complex sales. So we go into the apartments. We use 2 years here because of the smaller accounts that I had mentioned. There were 26 apartment sales, 4 and up, to larger ones. Again, median was 97, COD was low. Mixed use, not a lot of qualified sales, but the median, that's a typo with the 7, was 98, and the COD very low. And then on the last page, we have commercials with various types of commercials, office, retail, service shops and so forth, restaurants. There were about 26 sales qualified over that 2-year period, and the median's at 96 with a good COD. And then there were 26 industrial sales, we're on 96% at 3.52. And I had stated earlier, I'm still kind of going through the final values with the team on these, checking some of the big ones, and might have slight modifications on these. I wanted to get going, though, for our quality control aspect of all the residentials and condos and manufactured homes while we're wrapping these up. That's why we met with you. These are close and set. I'm just looking at the individual ones right now, qualifying them, so that we can get going on the next phase, which is about a 1.5-week process of quality control, working directly with the assessors, getting their input, and looking at everything from the different angles that we presented here and other things to get it ready for the hearings, which notices will probably be going out in about 2 weeks. So that's a reasonable debriefing of the process, the results, the old to new results, the stats results, and where we stand right now after doing the full inspections and the full field review, putting everything into the system, recalculating all the new tables based on the sales, and getting ready to generate values once we do the quality control process.
Is there any kind of a difference, say you live in a residential neighborhood at exit 8, you live in a residential neighborhood at exit 1, they're pretty comparable. Are homes more valuable at exit 1 because of their proximity to the Massachusetts border, or that's a non-factor?
Yeah.
Well, we don't break them
Grab
out
the
by
mic.
ward, we break them out by style.
Can you put the microphone close?
Stop.
Thanks.
So when we're looking at them, we're looking at all of the sales within the community, and we break them out by style and year build, not particularly by the location, as far as ward, if that's what you mean.
Well, I'm just wondering, as far as the proximity to the Massachusetts border.
Could I expand on that?
Sure.
To Dan, or Mr. Hansberry's point, I'm thinking of the townhouses off Cadigan Way down near Exit 1 versus the townhouses, let's say, in the Kessler Farm complex. The sales data suggests that the units down in Cadigan Way are selling for more than those up off
Sure.
Exit 8.
Yeah, I can answer that part.
Okay.
With the condos, it's pretty easy because we use the sales that are within the complexes. So adjustments would be specific to that location because of the sale prices, along with other amenities that would make it higher. And then a lot of times condos, if they're similar in construction, it is location, obviously. But also amenities, and what they have. So those would have those condo adjustments that we have. As for neighborhoods, location to the highway is one of the considerations, but also is the makeout of the type of home it is, in the borders that are around it. Is it, near water? Is it near railroad tracks? And what delineates it, access in and out? But I think if you have a quiet neighborhood, but you're only a half a mile from the highway, pretty good deal. So you would think that they would warrant a higher price. Any specific areas or questions that you have, we can get you any data you want. If you want to just put a little list together, we'll get you whatever you need. It was hard to get into a completely detailed process for this presentation, but we have anything you need.
Thank you. Just let the record show that Director Sam Green joined the meeting at 10:08. Welcome, Director Green.
Sorry, I was late.
That's all right. Questions, Mr. Bergeron or Mr. Early?
I don't have anything further, no.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. I was wondering if the process that Vision used will affect the property cards where we have been using EYBs, effective year built, and they use a different process. Will that be transferred into the property record cards going forward?
Yeah. And is there still an EYB based off of the table that's on there?
No,
Okay,
it's cleared.
it's cleared. So
I'm
the
sorry.
EYB is cleared, but the depreciation will be identified through, on the card so that they'll know what it is. And we'll have the codes in there.
Mhm.
Yeah, so now we'll work with the code, like average, good, fair, and then there'll be a depreciation that ties in with it. And we'll make sure the assessors have information, guidelines that can explain that to people.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
Sure.
Anything else, Mr. Early?
Nope, that was it.
All right. Any questions from staff? Okay. All right, so I guess a motion to adjourn is in order.
I would so move.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed say nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you very much. This was very informative, very
Okay,
helpful. We
it was
appreciate
nice
it.
to see you.